Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Charmley. This is another video in the series on Derbyshire churches. We're still in the same area as Norbury and Cubley. This is the pre-conquest church of St Giles, Marston Montgomery. That means it was built before 1066, or at least part of it was. Like Cubley, which shows signs of pre-conquest work, it has been much altered over the centuries, but unlike Cubley, it has received a massively over-the-top Victorian restoration, not in terms of the sort of Anglo-Catholic stuff, but just in terms of, oh, it's a medieval church, it's a pre-conquest church, let's make it look more the way we think it should look, rather than asking, well, actually, what should we preserve? Because the Victorians had this tendency, and you see it with a lot of these church restorations, that everything after about the 14th century needs to be swept away and replaced. And that's what you have here. So as we look around, and particularly as we look at the outside, because there are some photographs in the church of the building how it looked before, we shall see what the Victorians did. So join me in this tour of a very nice, charming building, but one that has been much altered in the 19th century. And so, as usual, we begin at the west end. There is no west tower here, not anymore. You can see, looking west, there is the old and the new, a modern flat screen for displaying words of songs and such like, and hymns. There doesn't appear to be a music group here, and there is obviously a usable organ, so I expect it's largely going to be hymns, but still there's a screen for displaying words, and then it's next door to a restored Anglo-Saxon arch. At the back we have, of course, the font. Nice tub again on a base. It all does look medieval. Here we have a photograph of the church as it used to look. You can see there was a west tower. It was offset and built onto the north aisle, and it was entered through a relatively recent entrance on the west end. The windows indicate that there was a 15th century style low-pitched roof with a clerestory, and you see the parapet there. All that's gone. Some of the windows survive, this Anglo-Saxon window at the west end most notably, but also this later medieval 14th century wide traceried window here. You have a 13th century perhaps aisle arcade, but the aisle itself has been rebuilt. The roof is a Victorian one with a steeper pitch. As we move towards the east end, we see the pulpit. Now the pulpit is carved, and this is early 20th century work. You have the figure of St Giles, and I suppose probably the Virgin Mary next to him. The aisle, you have these little windows, and it's, of course, it's Victorians trying to imitate the older work here, and so little windows because that's what you had. Now, up here we have something very interesting, which is the beer. There is the beer. Now, you remember the one at Cubley, if you watched the video at Cubley before this one, and you probably should. This is a very simple beer. This is the kind that's carried. The one at Cubley has wheels and springs, and this has none of that. The big window, faith, hope, and charity, but with faith in the middle, and this is a memorial to Lydia Ann Webb of Clownholm. The Webbs of Clownholm were an important local family. This is early 20th century. She died in 1913, and another member of the family was responsible for carving the pulpit. We go up the steps, but you see here, before we go up the steps, that the arch has been restored. This side, all that is smooth Victorian masonry. On this side, we've got some smooth Victorian masonry, but with Anglo-Saxon work behind, and then the actual arch itself is Anglo-Saxon. So we go up into the chancel, and you can see this alabaster now, because alabaster is local. So there are local alabaster quarries, which mean that you can get plenty of alabaster. You'll notice the batter on the wall here. This means this is an early medieval wall, because the slope is a very typical feature of early medieval work. The great big east window, which is actually fairly decent. We haven't got one of the I shall not be rude about certain stained glass window manufacturers, but I could be. The lectern here is a war memorial. You can see you've got the Dove of Peace under the bookboard. You've got a sword and flags, and the inscription, "These nobly played their parts. They heard the call for God and..." Can we see what's underneath it? "For God and King and home they gave their all." So this is the War Memorial, First World War Memorial, and it's of course carved with the names of the men who were killed in the war. We've got this altar table, medieval window, but it now looks out into the vestry. Nice organ. Is there a builder's plate on it? Oop, doesn't seem to be. That sudden drop was me missing a step, but I'm all right. So it's a 2-manual pedal board, and again your usual dummy pipes. And then you've got your cupboards here for books and whatnot. And there, looking all the way west, we have that lovely little window there. So that is the inside of the church, really. We'll go back. Here we have, by the font, you've got this odd piece here, and this is obviously made up of bits of the old box pews, because we've got a date 1639 here, 1703. There are initials, so that'll be the decorative material from the old box pews. Now, bear this in mind as we go outside. You've got your offset square tower, parapet, west door, windows. So that is the building as it was before the Victorians. That is the look. That is looking from the north west, which obviously is much plainer, and you can see also here, and it's actually hard to see anything in there, that you had the aisle, and the windows appear to be 15th century in the aisle. So there we are. That is the building as it was. Let's go and have a look at it now outside as it is. Also, here we are outdoors at Marston Montgomery, and you can see here, where's the tower? It's gone. It's been replaced by this little belfry at the top of the west gable. Whereas the parapet, it's gone, because that roof has gone. Whereas the clerestory, it's disappeared. The Victorians have taken this building and they've tried to revert it to an earlier period of its history. And so as we look around, we'll see some of how that worked, if we may say it worked. And so here we are at the west end. You can see immediately the contrast between the Victorian masonry of the aisle and the older masonry. Also, you can see where they blocked in the west doorway. The old window, the Saxo-Norman window, is still there. You have a porch. There was, of course, no porch in the photograph. And the clock is dated 1870, which is a good indication of perhaps when the restoration took place. And it'll weathercock up there reflect the sunlight and indicate the direction of the wind. There's not a lot of wind around today at all. So we move back towards the building, and we'll see in a moment where the west door was and some of the remains of the west doorway. That rather elegant door surround has gone, or has it? No, it has been hacked away, and one is somewhat annoyed with this, because why destroy what was evidently a nice piece of carving? Well, because it's not medieval. We have there one of the yew trees and a lich gate beyond. And where the tower was, of course, they've had to completely rebuild because the tower has been taken down. In fact, the whole aisle has been rebuilt. There's the vestry. Again, a more Victorian piece could perhaps not be imagined. It is, apologies for the sunlight, on this side it's Victorian. This medieval church has effectively disappeared within a Victorian rebuild. The rebuild, of course, has these little pointy windows, these lancets of 13th century type, because again they liked pointy windows. Churches should have pointy windows as part of the Victorian Gothic. We have here, it's a Norman window, reset but Norman. This is in fact, this has to be the organ chamber behind us, or in front of us rather. Nice bit of ironwork. We move round the east end, and then we can't go back round the east end because the east end comes right to the end here. But you can see this is again medieval work, this medieval stone there, so we have to go all the way back round the west end. It's the village of Marston Montgomery. It always feels quite isolated up here, and it certainly took long enough for the AA to come when I broke down here, but thankfully there is a very nice village pub, which is always a nice thing when you've broken down. You can see their old timber-framed farmhouse, and the pub is just down there past that doorway. It's a shame that it was destroyed, but again it's this idea, we have to get back to the medieval. Why? Here is the older part of the graveyard, and see these massive yew trees, their twisted trunks. And here we have, you can just see there's a Norman arch into the, or Saxo-Norman arch into the chancel. There's that big window, but where's the clerestory? Where's the parapet? It's all gone, swept away, because a Victorian restorer thought that we don't want any of this late medieval stuff. We just want to try and get back. And of course, modern heritage looks at it in horror, really. But there we are. It is a beautiful building, in spite of what the Victorians did to it. You see there again this rough medieval work contrasting with the very carefully jointed, although some of that stone looks like it's recycled, but which it must be because there's a clerestory up there, carefully jointed work by the Victorians. So we come into the porch. We've got this very heavy porch gate, which is always rather unfortunate, these gates. I don't remember whether it's push or pull. But inside we have this tympanum, archway, the restored Norman doorway, and the war memorial. You've just as at Cubley, and it looks like it's by the same man. It's a lectern, litany desk with this tab presenters thank offerings, and you've got Sergeant Skidmore, Lance Corporal John Copestake, Private Samuel Morris, Private George Wood, and then the great list of all the men who went out and came back, which reminds us, of course, that while many died, there were many who went out and came back. We also have a couple of nurses, Alice Louisa Muller and Edna Annie West. So a couple of women as well as all the men who went out. Well, let's wrap this up and say a few words in closing. So there we have it, the Church of St Giles, Marston Montgomery, a dedication that indicates that this was quite a remote place once. It still feels remote, although it's a proper village with all the amenities and good population. And this fascinating little church, origins before the Norman Conquest, massively over-restored in some respects by the Victorians, and yet over-restored as a useful building. It's not one of these buildings where you look at it and you go, well, this is just so over the top. It reflects, this reflects the Victorian Gothic ideal as Of course, we're not that far from Alton, we're not far from Alton Towers and from Pugin's work there at Cheadle. And this Victorian Gothic sensibility was very important in this area, very influential. But it's good to see this building. It's a lovely building, still very much loved and cared for. And remember again that the faith still lives. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you. I hope you enjoy these videos. I enjoy coming out and making them on lovely days like this. Thank you again. Goodbye.